Anybody that has been on the Navajo reservation has either heard of some creepy things or have experienced pretty creepy things themselves, namely skinwalkers. I have only ever seen one. Here is my story. I come from a small town in northern Arizona that's sandwiched between the Paiute Reservation to the north and the United States' largest Navajo reservation to the south. My high school, being so small, an A1 high school that has on average 80 students enrolled every year, I always had to travel south about 5 to 10 hours one way to play another high school in any sport. This means that we traveled a lot on the Navajo reservation, and we also usually stayed at hotels when we would head out to play and come home in the morning, but this trip was a little bit different. I remember the basketball coach saying that the school didn't have enough money to put the team up in a hotel that trip, so we were going to be on the road for a total of 12 hours. I was the only male senior to play basketball that season. We had just got done playing our game and headed home on our bus, which we affectionately called Big Blue. We were headed out, and it wasn't long, about 2 hours of driving, before we had entered the reservation. By this time, everyone was asleep, with it being about 2 in the morning. When we had crossed the reservation's border, I noticed the bus driver had sped up and was now going at about 85 miles per hour. I thought this was a little weird, because he never exceeded the speed limit, at least not in my high school career. For some reason, I couldn't fall asleep like the rest of my teammates, and I just sat at the back of the bus, staring out across the desolate desert landscape, which was lit by the full moon. As I looked out, I could see a figure running toward the bus at an angle of pursuit, and keeping up with the bus at 85 miles per hour. As the figure got closer, I saw that it was a humanoid form. As a matter of fact, it looked exactly like a human, only that the face was painted half black and half white, and it had glowing eyes. Glowing eyes like a rabbit's eyes, reflecting light from a spotlight. I immediately thought, holy crap, that's a skinwalker. The skinwalker ran up to the edge of the road and just kept up pace with the bus, hurtling sagebrush and rocks while staring directly at me. After I made eye contact with that thing, I could not look away. It was as if something was holding my head and eyes in place. The skinwalker just smiled at me, this inhuman smile that went from ear to ear, showing crooked, yellow, pointed teeth. I felt like I was going to throw up, and I was panicking through the whole ordeal. The skinwalker started to crumple down to all fours, still keeping up with the bus. I could see his bones crack and reform, hair started appearing all over his body, and in about 3 seconds, I was now looking at a coyote. It ran off, back into the desert and out of view. As soon as it was gone, I ran to the onboard bathroom and puked up a mixture of food and blood. I didn't want to tell anyone for fear that they would think I was crazy, but I confided in my Navajo friend. She told me that I needed to see the chief, who also happened to be a friend of mine, and get a blessing. I saw him the next day in school, in the parking lot. He just came up to me and mumbled something in Navajo while waving a feather scepter-like thing, turned around, got in his truck, and without a word, drove away. To this day, I haven't seen another skinwalker. It might be due to the fact that I have since moved away from town and the reservation, and if I ever have to go south, I go around. Way around. My father owns a small delivery service that operates out of Farmington, New Mexico. We mostly deliver small packages out to the middle of nowhere that are too much of a hassle for the larger delivery companies to bother with. My dad is the only employee, and we have a few pickup trucks and a trailer. One day we get a delivery out to Window Rock, Arizona, on the Navajo Reservation, about 2 hours from Farmington. My dad gets the call for the job while he's chilling with his Navajo friend Travis and his girlfriend. Travis mentions how he's got family in Window Rock that he hasn't seen in ages and suggests that they go with him. I was about 6 or 7 at the time, and it was the summertime, so Dad decides we'll all go down together. He can do his delivery really quick, then while Travis sees his family, we can go check out the Window Rock. This is a big rock face with a large hole in it that goes to the other side. It's pretty cool. We had to convoy in separate trucks since my dad's was loaded down with freight. We decided to bring along some walkie-talkies so we could communicate with one another. We spend our time in Window Rock. Everything is generally uneventful, and we start heading home along the old highway with my dad and I in front and Travis and his girlfriend in their truck behind us. I honestly don't remember most of the Window Rock trip, but this next part I will never forget. We're somewhere on the highway between Window Rock and Gallup, New Mexico. It had just rained earlier in the day, and the road was kind of slick, so we were taking it pretty slow. On the left of the highway, there is nothing but sandstone cliffs, and on the right, there is a huge field separated from the road by a small barbed wire fence. We crest the top of the hill, and down at the bottom of the hill, we see what appears to be a very large dog, sitting back on its haunches in the middle of the road, facing the cliffs. My dad calls over the radio, "Hey Trav, you see that big-ass dog?" Travis starts yelling back over the radio, "That is not a dog. Speed up and hit it. Speed up right now and hit it." He sounds almost hysterical. He just keeps screaming, "Hit it, please, you have to hit that thing right now." So, my dad starts to speed up, and as we get a bit closer, I can begin to see it a little more clearly. It's covered in this brown, wiry, matted hair that appears to have dried blood all over it. It's still facing the cliffs, but the moment our headlights hit it, it turns and looks at us, and this thing has a face. I don't know how else to describe it, other than a mix between a bear's face and a human's face. It looks twisted and distorted and almost in pain. As we get closer to this thing, we start to realize that it's actually freaking huge. Though it was still sitting on its haunches, it is about shoulder height with the hood of the truck. We get literally inches from hitting it when it lets out this scream that sounds like someone screaming as their lungs were filling with water, and it leaps backwards towards the field, landing just on our side of the barbed wire fence. Then with another leap, it was gone from sight. Travis comes over the radio again. "Holy shit. Keep driving. We have to get out of here. We have to go faster." He kept repeating that last part. "We have to get out of here. We have to go faster." Pretty soon we're speeding like crazy, and just as we start to come up near the outskirts of Gallup, we get pulled over. Travis pulls his truck over with us. Naturally, this makes the cop, a Navajo man himself, very on edge, and he immediately asks why Travis felt the need to pull over as well. Travis says, "We just saw a skinwalker a few miles back and it's been following us." The officer immediately turns white, stammers something about a verbal warning, gets in his car, and takes off. We do the same. We didn't see anything else that night, but when we got home, Travis refused to let us leave without taking some kind of Navajo totem thing that was supposed to keep it away. So yeah, I guess that's my Skinwalker story. When I was about 11 or 12, we lived in a small house made of mud and stone, a lot like our house now. It was 2 of my brothers and I in the house. Everyone else had gone to the Hamas feast and left us to tend the sheep. We were getting ready for bed when we heard the dogs going crazy outside. Thinking it was nothing more than coyotes howling in the distance, we told them to be quiet. We began to drift off into sleep, but the dogs would not shut up. Somehow, I was able to go to sleep for a few hours. Then, I woke up very late in the night. It was very quiet and still in the house, save for my brother's snoring and breathing. I realized that I needed to use the outhouse, and I woke up my brother to take me there. He teased me about being scared, which was true. I certainly was. We went out with our flashlight to the outhouse. The dogs began with their crazed barking out in the sagebrush, going from one place to the next and back. My brother went first, and I waited outside for him. While waiting, I tried to follow the dogs with my flashlight. Suddenly, there was a very loud whine from one of the dogs. Then everything went quiet again. It was really too quiet for that time of year. Not even the sheep were making noise. Suddenly, I heard a few of the dogs going completely mad by the truck. When I looked over, there was this man. He was unbelievably tall, leaning one arm on the cab roof of the truck. He was looking at the dogs for a little, and then suddenly he started kicking one of them. They all scattered in different directions. This thing looked up at me, and I saw its face. It had a pure white face like a full moon, 2 burning red eyes, and a slight smile that was pure black. I could not move or make a sound. It began walking toward me with long strides until it finally towered over me. All I began to see was a dark red, like the color of blood when you cut the throat of a sheep. I kept getting deeper and deeper into its eyes. I could faintly hear my brother coming out of the outhouse. With this, the thing looked up at him. Reality came rushing back to me. I noticed that my brother was too distracted with his buckle to realize what was going on. I also noticed this thing's long hands hovering just inches from my head. Its skin was black ash, and he smelled like a bloated dead animal in the heat of summer. I was still unable to move or speak. The Skinwalker began to move toward my brother. Finally noticing this figure, my brother became paralyzed as I was. Closer and closer it drew, reaching an arm out toward my brother's head. Something finally snapped in me, and I became unbearably angry. I broke from the trance and lunged at the Skinwalker, raising my arms like a wild animal and baring my teeth at it. A growl came out of me that I didn't even know I could make. I became more and more hysterically angry at the thing that was trying to hurt us. It kept that smile at first, but the angrier I got, the more the smile faded. Finally, with everything I had left, I began to make this primal roar at the thing. It fell backwards and ran away into the night. Looking back at me, its eyes were dim and dull, its smile now long since gone. The next morning, the family returned home from the feast. After relaying the story to my parents, they quickly hired a medicine man, and we have had no further incidents. It was 1995, and I had just graduated high school. An old friend who I haven't talked to in 7 years now and I were hanging out, and I said, "Let's go to New Orleans." So we did. We had $140 between us, and back then that was more than enough. We made it to New Orleans, almost died from culture shock, and turned around and headed to Magnolia, Mississippi to get some sleep. We stayed at Magnolia Inn. It was a shithole, but it was nice and cool. It was May or June in South Mississippi. Cool was the only adjective that mattered. We stayed up that night, playing poker, drinking Gordon's vodka, and talking about who knows what. probably girls and college girls. At some point I said, "Ever been to Texas?" My friend said, "Nope." I said, "Pack your bag and let's roll." We had a road atlas. Marshall, Texas was right across the border from Shreveport. We arrived in Shreveport, made a phone call to another friend who we were actually supposed to be staying with. Both of our mothers had called looking for us. The only person that knew where we actually were was the buddy on the phone. It was no big deal. We could be home in a day or two. Before we left that rest area in Shreveport where we made the call, we saw an armadillo. Let me tell you something about armadillos. Those bastards will hiss, jump, and turn into Tasmanian devils if you corner them. They also carry leprosy, we're told. We were 18. We chased that armadillo around for an hour. Now let me tell you about Shreveport. I don't know how it is now, but in the summer of 1995, it looked and smelled like a place where oil and metal went to die. It was dirty. We crossed a bridge and saw people fishing 100 yards from where a drainage pipe from a factory was spewing forth waste upriver from the fishermen. The locals remind me of the locals in Adamsville. Bald-headed women and cross-eyed men. A lot of bald-headed, cross-eyed kids. Listen, I'm sorry, but it was a Rob Zombie movie come to life. I felt like I was going to be killed because I had a head full of hair and I could see straight. The best part of Shreveport was an armadillo that might possibly have leprosy. So, we chased it around for a while. But Marshall, Texas was 40 miles away, so we rolled on. Marshall was a decent little town, home of the Fire Ant Festival. We stopped at a little barbecue joint and had a Coke, a smile, and some pulled pork. It was getting late and the sun was setting. We looked at the map and decided to backtrack a bit and head up rural Route 43 through Karnak and past Caddo Lake. We would eventually run into Highway 59, head to Texarkana, and then head back home. When we left the barbecue joint, we headed towards 43. It was dusk. Highway 43 wasn't well lit. It was almost as dark as Natchez Trace Park. I've got a good story about that place too. My friend was driving and we were doing about 45 miles per hour. Any faster would have been reckless, even for a couple of 18-year-old dumbasses. This road was kind of like Christmasville Road. If you're a local reading this, you'll know what I mean. If you're not, you'll just have to use your imagination. It was dark, winding, full of hills that ended in curves. There were beady and glowing eyes on both sides of the road. You could hear the crickets and the bullfrogs over the sound of the wind rushing by that old Sentra. It was peaceful and creepy at the same time. The humidity was a real, tangible thing. The air was thick. It smelled like pastures, hay, and swamp. We drove for what seemed like hours. It was after midnight, and I saw a sign that informed me that Bivens was the next town of any size. I was hypnotized by the yellow lines on the road. We hadn't seen another car in at least an hour. Sleepy, I rolled the window down and lit a cigarette. There was music coming from the radio, the tape player, as it was. It was either Tupac or something like him. I smoked my cigarette, absent-mindedly flicking ashes out of the window. I took one last puff and flicked the Camel short off into the woods, and then I saw it. I never looked to my right. I didn't even kind of peek to the right. Maybe I did a little when I flicked the cigarette away, I don't know. What I do know is that in my periphery there was something running alongside the car. It was just behind my window, behind where the edge of the door ends and before where the back window begins. I looked over at the speedometer. 40 miles per hour. I looked at my friend. He was looking straight ahead. I looked straight ahead, but I could still see it. I could see one huge arm, Matted hair, reddish-brown, sticky-looking, primal. I eased my right hand over and rolled up my window. My friend was still looking straight ahead, his jaw clenched. He put both hands on the wheel and sped up. I knew that he had seen it too. We didn't speak a word to each other. I looked straight ahead, but still, out of my periphery, I could see that arm moving, muscles and tendons visibly rippling beneath that matted hair. As the car gained a little speed, the thing running alongside us lost pace, but only slightly. And then I saw the hand on the end of that nightmarish arm. The hand was clenched into a fist the size of a cantaloupe, and a big cantaloupe at that. It was covered in the same hair, but slightly darker around the fingers, like it was stained with something. Suddenly the hand unclenched, and then I saw the claws, black as this damned after midnight Texas night. Those claws were at least 2 inches long, sharp like an animal's. This wasn't the hand so much as it was the killing paw and claws of some beast whose only purpose was to kill and eat. I looked back at my friend. I looked at the speedometer. 50 miles an hour. I looked straight ahead. It was still there. I lit another cigarette, but I didn't dare roll down the window. All I said was, "Shit." The music had stopped. I finally broke the silence and said, "Hey, do you—" And before I could finish, my buddy said, "I see it. I've been seeing it. I can't even see you, but I can see whatever the hell that shit is." I said, "How much do you see?" "More than I want to." "Speed up," I said. "Speed up, John. Just speed up. It can't keep up forever." I looked over. 55 miles per hour. Whatever was chasing us, silently, was starting to lag behind. I finally looked to my right. Just a bit. Imagine the scary part of a scary movie, where you put your hand in front of your face but you still peek through. In 37 years of my life to date, I have 2 regrets. One is picking up that first cigarette, and the other is looking to my right. This beast was huge. Its chest was above the top of the car, and all I could see was that matted, reddish-brown hair. Then it bent forward as it ran, and I saw the face of this thing, and in that moment, all reality stopped. We were no longer driving down some country road in Texas. We were now trying to escape from the depths of a monster-inhabited hell. The thing's face is beyond my power to describe. It was evil. The eyes were black and the pupils were red. It flashed its teeth at me in a snarl, yellow and huge. Saliva dripped from its mouth. It opened its eyes, wide, and it looked hungry and pissed off. Then it opened its mouth. The skin pulled back until all you could see were black gums and yellow teeth. Immediately, I could feel the car accelerate. "Fucking hell, John, just go!" I prayed, I swore, I lit another cigarette. Then, like sunshine breaking through the clouds, the road straightened out. I looked at John. "Don't you dare slow down." We drove through Bivens, and we drove to Texarkana. Then we drove home. We never said a word. It was years later, 11 to be exact, before we ever could even talk about it again, and we didn't talk about it much. He said that he had never told anyone, and I hadn't either. I told the story a few years back for the first time while I was parked out on a gravel road, doing the things you do when you're parked out on a gravel road with a good-looking woman. I told it a year or so ago to a couple of kids who wanted to hear a scary story while they sat around a campfire. They didn't sleep for a day or 2, but they did ask me a dozen more times to tell them the story. Beyond that, I never told anybody, until now. And until now, I never told anybody that I saw its face. I've been scared for my life exactly 2 times. Once was on that road, and once was looking at a grizzly bear in front of me with a terminal velocity-inducing drop to the side of me. Call it what you will. Call it bullshit if you want. But if you could look me in the eyes and let me tell you this story, you would know it's the truth. Never doubt that there are things in this world that defy explanation and logic. The boogeyman is real. Some 16 or 17 years after this happened, I ran across a story and a movie called The Legend of Boggy Creek in Fouke, Arkansas, where the aforementioned story and movie takes place. That place isn't that far from Bivens, Texas, as the crow flies. Invite me over, buy me a beer, sit on the porch with me, and I'll tell you the story over a pack of Marlboros and a few of those beers. You'll know I'm telling the truth. This all happened about 5 years ago. One night, a few of my friends decided after a night of hanging out that we should go on an adventure at about 3 a.m. We took a ride about 50 miles to this old Spanish ruin in New Mexico. It was once the seat of the Inquisition. I can't for the life of me remember what this place is called. We jumped the front gate of the place and started exploring. One of my friends brought a flute with him, and he started playing it, and about 30 seconds into his mediocre playing, something started screaming really, really loudly on the tops of the long destroyed walls of the place. It was going from wall to wall, really quick, screaming the most blood-curdling scream you could ever imagine. We noped out of there. One of my friends literally pissed his pants, and we drove for a few hours to Bandelier National Monument, where we planned to camp out for the rest of the weekend. We got to Bandelier at probably 6 or 7 in the morning and set up our camp. After talking about what had happened at the ruins, I went to take a piss about 300 feet from our camp. This is where everything starts to get a little fuzzy. I remember seeing 2 dust devils coming my way, and when I turned around again, 2 of my friends were there, and they were motioning me to follow them. I couldn't help but follow them, like I was being pulled behind them in shackles. I followed them for what seemed like 10 or 15 minutes, but then when I snapped out of it, I realized these were not my friends. They had bright red hair. They had my friends' faces, but they had cat eyes. Both of these friends were brunette. I stopped walking, and they looked at me with probably the most terrifying gaze I've ever seen. Monsters in movies are nothing compared to this. I turned around and ran as fast as I could back the way I came. After about 5 minutes in a full sprint, I got back to that rock and the campsite near it. Everyone was there, still sitting around, talking. They didn't even notice I was gone. I told them what happened with the look-alike skinwalkers, and we packed up everything and left within about 10 minutes, and got the hell back to Albuquerque. I was visiting my grandparents out in Shiprock, New Mexico during last October to see my family and to go to the Northern Navajo Nation Fair that week. Many Navajo people, including my own family, are very reluctant to speak about skinwalkers because it is believed that even speaking their name can attract their attention. However, I grew up away from the Navajo Nation and was very naive about the subject. When it came to skinwalkers, I was an absolute skeptic. My mom used to tell a story of how back in the 80s, when she lived with her siblings and my grandparents, still in Shiprock but the southern outskirts, how she and my aunt had seen a skinwalker just outside their driveway under a streetlight. She described it as a black dog with dirty fur, a twisted, noodle-like front leg, and these unnatural eyes with a soft, burnt orange glow. Me, being my own close-minded self, doubted every word, but of course I never spoke my doubts aloud. These doubts totally changed last year when I went to my grandparents' house. Me and my family had just finished going to the carnival at the Navajo Nation Fair and called it a night. The house was close enough where we could walk home in just 10 minutes, so we did. When we got there, it was about 9 at night, where we stayed up until about 2, catching up about family affairs and the local news. It was during that time that I just decided to open my mouth and blurt out a question. "Hey, are skinwalkers real?" Silence. "Guys?" I asked. "You shouldn't be speaking about that," my grandma said, with almost a disturbed yell in her voice. So she and my grandfather both decided to go to bed. After being scolded by my mom, one of my aunts chimes in a very cautious tone and says, "They're real all right. Had a few start screaming outside of my trailer in Farmington just a few nights ago. Your cousin had nightmares the whole night and woke up crying that morning. They're real." Not wanting to push the discomfort any further, we all decided to go to bed. Now the trailer/home is pretty old and it was really a nice night, so we slept with the windows open, with screens to prevent the bugs from coming in. Everyone had drifted off to sleep, except for me, because my mind was still going a million miles a minute about skinwalkers. I wondered if I ever encountered one while I was here on the reservation. What would I do if I did? As a kid, I was told it was a taboo thing to think about skinwalkers because even that can call their attention. And that's when the shit totally hit the fan. Just as I was settling and finally getting relaxed for sleep, I started to hear something moving outside. I'd get up from the couch and start wandering over to the kitchen window. In the trailer, all of the rooms have the lights out, so the only visible light that can be seen is from the porch out front. I was thankful for this, because I told myself that if it really was a skinwalker outside, hopefully it wouldn't notice me seeing it. So I muster up the courage and take a quick scan of the outside. From the porch light, all I can see is the dusty ground and the vehicles that my family drove, along with some old metal trash cans that stood beside the road. Looking for about a good 5 seconds, I wasn't able to see anything, so I was getting ready to turn around and walk back to bed, thinking that it was just a stray cat in my imagination. I'd only taken about 2 steps when I heard what sounded like a distorted scream coming from outside, definitely close by. Fear rising, I look outside again, and there I see it. A coyote-like figure was staring at my direction from behind the cars, just outside of the reach of the porch light. Only it looked awfully wrong, and gave off an evil vibe just from me looking at it. It was gray, with very disheveled hair and a horrific orange-red soft glow that came from its eyes. I noped the hell out of there and ran back to my bedroom. It was at this moment I had begun to also notice an awful stench in the air that smelled like rotting meat. I started trying to wake up my mom, who was like, "Oh my God, it's almost 3 a.m., what do you want?" I immediately began to tell her, in a shaking voice, "There's something scary outside." Then she said, thoroughly annoyed because I'd woken her up, "It's just a stray animal or something. It's the res. Animals wander around all the time. Go to bed." She obviously wasn't getting the drift of what I was saying, so I screamed, "Mom, there is some Blair Witch shit going on outside. Get up." That got her attention. "What? What the hell are you talking about?" Then we heard it. The thing outside started making more of its dreadful-like screams and started what sounded like thrashing the trash cans on the ground. "Hear that? That's what I'm talking about." So both her and I got back up, looked outside the window, and the coyote thing was making its way to the door. Walked with an odd limp and dragged its back right leg as if it had some sort of disability or handicap, like it had been injured. We could hear it start to scratch against the door and make this odd, muffled, moaning sound. My mom went and got my dad, and they both started shouting in Navajo, all sorts of words telling the thing to go away and saying that it's not welcome here. Well, all this commotion was enough to get the rest of the trailer up as they came out into the hallway. The only thing my mom did was turn to all of them and say, "Skinwalker," while proceeding to point to the door, the noises still happening outside. Apparently, they already knew exactly what to do, as my grandfather got out a handgun from a drawer and a bag of ashes. He coated a few bullets and loaded them into the gun, and went straight to the door. Yelling out more Navajo that was too fast for me to comprehend, he swung the door open and fired twice. Nothing. The thing managed to escape before my grandpa could put a bullet in it. "That's the fastest one I've ever seen," said my grandpa. Next thing you know, my aunts and my parents are freaking out about what just happened, saying things like, "What if it comes back tomorrow?" and "It saw us. Does that mean we're targets now?" Afterwards, my grandparents calmed everyone down, myself included, saying we would all be fine, and we all went to bed. Morning comes, and my grandparents call one of their neighbors to explain what happened. Apparently, one of them was a medicine man who used to partake in Ye-Bishes, Navajo ceremonies used for healing and curing sickness. He came over to bless each family member and the grounds outside. Today, I'm very convinced that what I saw was a skinwalker. I still plan on going back for visits to the family and the Northern Navajo Nation Fair. It's really fun. I just adamantly hope that I never have such an awful experience like that again. Welcome back. I hope you all enjoyed this selection of Skinwalker tales. I don't believe I've read any of these before on the channel, which of course is always my goal, but I thought these were pretty creepy. Again, the Conscious Panda article that I read these from is listed below in the video description. There are many, many more stories in that article. There were 19 in total, and I only read 6. So definitely go check out that article and read the rest of them, because they are pretty terrifying. I'll probably include some of the rest of them in like a future video, but as you guys know, preparing for night marathon, so just doing some shorter stories right now. So I know this is a favorite topic among most of the horror community, and certainly I think this topic is really, really interesting too. So hope you enjoyed those stories. I will definitely be back one more time. I think on the 27th I have a video scheduled as well. I'm pre-recording and scheduling a lot of these out. I'm trying to keep up with the comments and everything as well. So thank you guys so much for your continued support, those of you who are subscribers. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so if you would like to keep up with the stories that I post here and the videos. And certainly be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell before October, because that's when the 2 videos per day from the 1st to the 30th happens, and then every hour starting on midnight on Halloween, Dracula chapters will be uploaded. So it is a crazy time of year right now, but I'm very, very excited about it. So hope you guys have a wonderful evening, a wonderful weekend if you're listening to this in my time zone when this is posted, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.